Okay, we begin the Gemara today on Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom of the page where it says Kida Omar Rav Nachman. So we're in the middle of a sugya here. The Gemara is going to discuss the Mishnah. Going back to the Mishnah on Amud Aleph, the Mishnah talks about a person. There's a few cases in the Mishnah. The first case in the Mishnah is where a person borrowed a cow, and actually the deal was that half of the day it's borrowed, half of the day it's a rental. Or for one day he's borrowing, and for the next day it's a rental. That's one case. Another case afterwards, the Mishnah said, is where he borrowed 2 cows. And one cow was borrowed, and the other cow is a rental. Now what happened? In the first case of the Mishnah, it says that the cow died, or in the other case, one of the cows died, and now the owner says that it died in the time when you borrowed it. So if it died in the time that you borrowed it, you're responsible to pay. Because a shayl pays even for an einus. But the renter / borrower says, no, it died in the time when it was rented. Or, in the last case, the Sefer, that cow which was rented is the one that died. Oh, so actually the ratio of the Mishnah was that the borrower / renter is answering Shema. I ran to the other case of the Mishnah here. In this case of the Mishnah, he's answering, I'm not sure. Any Yedea. Could be it died at the time when it was rented. Could be it died at the time when it was borrowed. Doesn't know. What did it say in the Mishnah? If you don't know, you chayiv to pay. The owner says, I know for a fact that you chayiv to pay because it died in the time of when it was borrowed. And you say you don't know, bari v'shema, bari yodif. So you have to pay. So the Gemara brought here that there's a machlokes between Rav Yehuda, Rav Huna, and Rav Yehuda, and Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say, regarding any case similar, regarding a loan, a person says, you owe me $100, and he answers, I'm not sure, I don't remember if I paid, I didn't pay, so you chayiv. So that's exactly what it says in the Mishnah. What Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan say, in such a case, bari v'shema, lav bari yodif. Even though you have the definite claim, and he answers, I don't know, you still don't have to pay. Because the money is in your chazaka. You have the money in your pocket. If he wants to take the money out of your pocket, he has to prove it. So you're going to be potter. So the Gemara asked the question on Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan. In our Mishnah, in such a kind of case, it clearly says that you're going to be chayiv to pay. Because you say you don't know, you have to pay. So it's a clear question on what Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan says. So that's where we're holding here. So the Gemara now is answering this question. Talk to Gemara. The answer here is, Kida Omar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said elsewhere, regarding a shaila, Kogoin sheyesh esek shvur beinayim. That over here in this Mishnah, when it says that you chayiv to pay, the reason is because there is an obligation of a shvur between them, and the obligation of the shvur that he would have to swear is in such a way that he can't actually swear, as the Gemara is going to explain. And because he can't actually swear, you become obligated to pay. So the point of the Gemara's answer is going to be that really the halacha is bari v'shema, lav bari yodif. You don't have to pay. In this Mishnah, when it says that he has to pay, the reason is because there's another part to the story that it doesn't say in the Mishnah clearly, that really there was an obligation for you to swear, and you're not actually swearing, as the Gemara will explain why not. So therefore, that's why in the Mishnah you have to pay. So now, Hachanami here, just like Rav Nachman said elsewhere, in our Mishnah as well, there is a shvur, an obligation of a shvur between them, and therefore he's going to have to pay. Hey, chidami esek shvur. So what's the pshat in our Mishnah? Why is there any obligation of a shvur between them? If you just take the case the way it says it in our Mishnah, there's no reason for any shvur. The owner comes and says that the one that was borrowed died, and you come and answer, I don't know. When you answer, I don't know, you have no obligation to swear anything. You just don't know. So where is there any obligation of a shvur? So the Gemara says, first the Gemara describes what this asek shvur, what is an example of a case where you're obligated to swear, but you can't swear. That's the first thing the Gemara explains. Then the Gemara is going to come back to our Mishnah to add another part to the story of our Mishnah that will show us how in the Mishnah there's also this obligation for a shvur. So the Omar Rava said as follows. What happens if a person says to his friend, Mona li biyadcha, you owe me $100. V'alo imer, and he answers, Ein lecha biyadi ela chamishim. 50, I admit that I owe you. So he's a maideh b'miktzas. Right there, he's a maideh b'miktzas, so he's chayiv to make a shvur. That's the halacha always regarding a person that's maideh part, he's chayiv. Shvur. Now, v'hashar, but the thing is here, what does this person say regarding the other 50? Eini yedeya. I can't remember if I owe it to you or not. So here, this is a person that's chayiv b'shvur because he's a maideh b'miktzas, but he can't actually swear. Because a Maida B'Miktsas only swears if he knows. If the other 50 he says, I deny, I don't owe you that other 50. So then you swear regarding the other 50 that you don't owe it. But if you're saying regarding the other 50 you don't know, so you're chayiv to make a shvuah because you were a Maida B'Miktsas, but at the same time you can't swear. So in such a case, Rava says the halacha is mitoich she'ena yachol lishava. If you're obligated to swear because you were a Maida B'Miktsas, but because of your taina of any day you can't actually swear, the halacha is in such a case mishalim, you pay. This is a rule that Rava says there, and the Gemara says in other places as well. It plays out in other cases that when a person is obligated to make a shvuah and he can't swear, so the Torah says that either you swear or you pay. If you're not going to be able to swear, then you're going to be chayiv to pay. So this is the case of the asek shvuah when you're obligated to make a shvuah, but because you're saying any day you can't actually swear, so you pay.
The whole thing.
He has to pay the whole thing, correct. The part that he admitted, he obviously pays. And then even the other part that he says, any Yedea, he's now going to have to pay as well.
So the Machlekes of Bava Metzia, if you pay or you don't pay, is it only in the place where, in the file where there's a question of a shua?
No, over there there's no shvuah. Over there the person's not a Maida B'Miktsas. The case before we were speaking about Bari V'Shema, he's a Kaifer HaKoil, or he's just saying on the whole entire claim, any Yedea. So over there's no chiyuv of the shvuah. The chiyuv of the shvuah is only if, regarding part of the claim, he says, yeah, I admit half. Bari v'shema is when he's saying on the whole thing any yedea. There's no asik shvuah. Right? It's a different case. Over here we're talking about 50, he says he admits. It's a different story. So over here, because he was made on 50, there's a chiyuv of a shvuah.
Why can't you make a shvuah on just the 50?
The 50 he admits. 50 he admits. The other 50 he's saying, Eini Yedeya. You don't make a shvuah of Eini Yedeya. There's no such a thing. So he can't make any shvuah. He's chayiv to make a shvuah because he's a Maida B'Miktsas, but he can't actually make the shvuah. So now the Gemara is going to apply this to our Mishnah, that it's also talking about such a kind of case. So in our Mishnah, all it said is that we're talking about one animal. I gave you one animal, and the owner says it died when it was barot, so you have to pay. And he's answering, I don't know what happened to that. I don't know when it died. Maybe it died at the time of the rental. But now, in order for us to explain that there's a case over here where there's a shvuah, the Gemara is going to explain that really in the Reish of the Mishnah where it says there was one animal, there was really two. And there's another part to this claim and his response that the Mishnah didn't say. So what's the case of the Mishnah? Mishkachas la Reisha. So in the first case of the Mishnah where it speaks about when there was one cow, so we're going to have to say really bebase. There were two. And in the Seifa of the Mishnah where it says that there were two, and one of them is still alive, and the other one died, and the question is, which one died? Did the one that's the rental died, or is the one that the borrow died? Really be gimel. It's talking about that there's a third cow, in order for us to explain that there's an asik shvuah here. And the Gemara now spells out the entire thing. So the Gemara, according to some Rishonim, this whole entire arichis in the Gemara here is not part of the Gemara itself. This is an addition from one of the Gaonim, Rav Yehudoi Gaon. He added in and spelled out this whole thing in the Gemara. So now, Reisha bebeis. The beginning of the Mishnah is talking about really that there were two cows that he borrowed/rented from him. The Amalei, so now the owner says to him, Beis paris masartilach, I gave you two cows. Palge the Yaime b'sheilas, on the first case of the Mishnah, half of the day determines war that you were borrowing it, or Palge the Yaime b'schiris, on the other half of the day you're renting it. Inami, or in the next case of the Mishnah, Chad Yaime b'sheila, one day it was borrowing, and V'chad Yaime b'schiris, the next day you were renting these two cows. And then what happened there? Umeisu tarvayu. Both of these cows died. Now, be'idan sheila. The owner says, when did both of these cows die? In the time when you were borrowing it. So you have to pay me for both of these cows. That's his claim. For this, what is the borrower/renter answer? In be'idan sheila mesa. You're right. One of these cows, I admit to you, it died in the time when it was borrowed. So here is where you have an asik shvuah. He was just maida to half. So he's a maida b'miktsas. Now ve'idach, regarding the other cow, here's where we go back to what it actually said in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah it says that he's saying, I don't know. It's regarding the other cow that he says, lo yadaina. I don't know. Did it die when it was borrowed, or did it die when it was rented? So what's the halacha in this case? So now we understand why the Mishnah says that he has to pay. Even if you say, bari v'shema, lav bari adif, then in such a case you wouldn't have to pay. But over here, because he was a maida b'miktsas, he's chayiv to pay. Because mitoich she'eni yachli shava, since he can't swear, mishalim. In a case where you're chayiv shvuah, but you can't swear because you're saying, I don't know, so instead you have to pay. That's the first case of the Mishnah. Okay, Rashi here clarifies that the Gemara here is explaining that there are two cows, and he's maida on one of them, and that's what makes it a maida b'miktzas. But the Gemara is medayik to say that both cows died. Why couldn't the Gemara say that one cow is still alive? And he's being maida, and he's saying, here, this cow, I'm maida is yours, and take it back. Why can't the maida b'miktzas be in such a case? Why the maida b'miktzas dafke when both cows died? So Rashi explains, based on what we learned earlier in the Masechta on Daf Hey, that when you're maida b'miktzas, but that part that you're admitting to, you're giving him right now, that's what's called halach. If you're giving it to him right now, so then it's not called a maida b'miktzas anymore. Maida b'miktzas is when you made it to a part, but you're not paying it right now. If you pay it right now, then we could view it as a kaifer akayl. What I made is already removed. I'm giving it to you. And now the remainder, I denied the whole thing. So in order to explain that it's a maida b'miktzas, the Gemara is explaining that both cows died and he's not giving him anything now. He's just admitting one cow I'm going to pay you and the other cow I don't know. So there's an asik shvuah here and he can't swear, so you pay. That's regarding the first two cases of the Mishnah. When it spoke about when there was one cow, so the Gemara says there has to be another cow here. Okay, now the Gemara goes on regarding the next case of the Mishnah. The Seifa of the Mishnah where it said that there was one that was a rental, there was one that he borrowed, and one of them died and one of them is still alive. So really the case is Big Gimel. There were three cows over here. And the Amalei, the owner says to the borrower/renter, Gimel Paris Nasati Lacha. I gave you three cows. Beis b'she'ela, two of them were borrowed, and va'achas b'schiris, and one of them was a rental. Umeisa hanitarti d'she'ela. And it's the two of the borrowing that died. So in our Mishnah it just says that the one was borrowed, one was rented, and he's telling him the one that was borrowed died and the one that was rented is still alive. But over here we have to add, in order to make it a maida b'miktzas, besides the one that was rented, that he's saying is still alive, he's saying no, two that I gave you as that I borrowed, that I lent you, he borrowed, those are the two that died. That was what the claim of the owner is. You have to pay me for two. And for this, the borrower, shoyel, the borrower/renter answers, yes, there is a part that I admit to you. The one of them that I borrowed died at the time when not at the time. One that was borrowed, that's the one that died. So okay, so that I'm chayiv. So he's a maida b'miktzas. Idoch, the other one that I borrowed, lo yadain, or the other one that actually that he says that died, lo yadain the sheila mesa or the kaima the schiris. I don't know if it's also the one that I borrowed that died, and the one that's still alive is the one that I rented. The schiris mesa, or maybe no, the other one that died is actually the one that I rented. V'ha the kaima the sheili, and the one that's still alive is the one that I borrowed. So regarding that one, I'm not sure. So here's where he's saying any ideya. So again, the halach is since he doesn't, he's chayiv to make a shvuah, but he doesn't know regarding the part that he says he doesn't know. So for that he can't make a shvuah, so therefore he has to pay. Okay, now the Gemara is going to take this case and yet go to the next level. That you have to add to the story here that there's actually more cows involved here. As we'll see. So the Gemara says, Rami Bachome adds regarding the Shvuah by Shomrim, and he says as follows. The Omar, he said, Dalit Shomrim, when it comes to the four Shomrim, the Torah says that four Shomrim have to make a Shvuah. All the four Shomrim, they have to swear, depending each Shomer according to his case. A Shomer Chinam, if he's going to claim that he wasn't negligent, he's going to have to swear. A Shomer Sacha is going to have to swear if he claims that an Einus happened, and so on. Each Shvuah, where the Torah says that if he claims he's not responsible, he has to swear. The only time a Shomer swears is Tzrichim Kfire b'miktzas, Vayda b'miktzas. It's only if he is denying a part of the claim and he's being made at the part of the claim. Which means, according to Rami Bachame, the halacha of a meidu miktzas, where the Torah says you have to swear, where is it written in the Torah? It says in the Torah, Yomer Olav ki huzeh. He's saying, I only owe you this, and I deny that. That's the lashon of the pasuk. Where does that pasuk say? It says it in the parasha of the Shomrim. Therefore, Rami Bachame says the Torah is teaching you that the whole idea that a shomer has to swear when he denies that, and he says, I'm not responsible, it's only if he's a maida b'miktzas and a kaifer b'miktzas. That's a shomer is only chayav a shvuah if he's also a maida b'miktzas. Okay, that's the Nakuda that Rami Bachama said. Okay, but now here there's a certain diak though here in this Gemara. The Gemara is saying that Rami Bachama said not only is the shomer going to be chayav shvua only if he's a meida b'miktzas, but he has to be a kofer b'miktzas. It's not enough the fact that he's a meida b'miktzas, which means he's really arguing on another detail that Rava said before. Rava said before, when a person admits to part, and regarding the other part he says, I don't know. You call the Maida b'miktzas and you chayav a shvua. You can't b'poil make a shvua because you can't swear about what you don't know. But you're really chayav the shvua by the very fact that you were a Maida b'miktzas. Rami Bachama though holds that the lashon of the pasuk ki hu zeh means that the person is saying this I Maida to and this I deny, which means a Maida b'miktzas is not chayav a shvua in a case where he's saying any ideya. In the way Rava described it, when a person says any ideya, you're not going to be chayav shvua. In order to be chayav shvua of Maida b'miktzas, you have to be admitting part and fully denying part, a real kfir b'miktzas. So if that's the case, we can't anymore say what the Gemara said before, that there are two cows here, and there's one that he's admitting, and there's one that he says I don't know. If there's one that you're admitting and one you say you don't know, you're still not chayav shvua. In order for you to be a chayav shvua for Maida b'miktzas, you have to admit and you have to deny. Then you're going to be a chayav shvua. So then in our Mishnah, where it says that he says I don't know, you're going to have to say that the case over here is that there's three cows in the ratio of the Mishnah. One he says I admit, the other one he says I totally deny, and then the third one is where he comes and says I don't know. That's what the Gemara is adding now over here. Okay, that's the chiddush of this Gemara. This is the way Rashi explains it. The Rishonim have a hard time understanding this because this concept of Rami Bachama, this shita of Rami Bachama, is brought in a lot of places in Shas. We had it before over here in the Masechta as well. That Rami Bachama holds that a shomer is only chayiv if he's a meida b'miktzas, but it never mentions this detail. That he also argues on an additional point that meida b'miktzas must also be a kofer b'miktzas. It's not enough if he says I don't know. He has to also be a kofer b'miktzas in order to be chayiv in the shvua of Maida b'miktzas. That's a detail the Gemara only mentions here, and it never mentions it anywhere else. Some Rishonim go so far to say, that, as I mentioned before, that this piece of the Gemara is not part of the Gemara. It's from Rav Yehudai Goin, and they say that they disagree with this because you don't find this anywhere else in Shas where it says such a thing that Rami Bachama holds that you must actually have a full denial. It's not enough that he was Maida and he says I don't know. But that's what it says here in our Gemara. This is the pshat here. Okay, so let's continue inside. So the Gemara now says, according to Rami Bachama, Mishkachas la Reisha, in the Reisha of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah said that he's saying I don't know and he's chayiv, if you're going to want to explain that there's a chiyuv of a shvua here, you're going to have to say that there's another two cows in addition to the cow that the Mishnah was talking about. So the Reisha is going to have to be the Gimel, that there are three cows in total, and the Seif B'Dalet. And the Seif of the Mishnah is going to have to be that we're talking about four different cows. And then Gemara still spells it out. Reisha begimel, and the Reisha of the Mishnah does three cows there. The Amalei, so the owner says to the borrower / renter, Gimel paris nasatilach, I gave you three cows. Palga de yayme b'sheila. So in the first case of the Mishnah, the terms were half of the day you're borrowing it, or palga de yayme b'schiris. The other half of the day it's a rental. Inami, or the next case the Mishnah says, chad yayme b'sheila, one day it's borrowing, v'chad yayme b'schiris. The next day it's a rental. Umeisu gimel kulu be'idin sheila. Now the owner claims that all three died in the time when you were borrowing it. So you have to pay me now for all three. V'amalei, and Shoyel, the borrower / renter, answers him and says, Chade le'hoyed dvarim olam. One of these cows that you told me that you gave me never happened. I didn't get three from you, I only got two from you. So that's where he's a kofer b'miktzas. This is according to Rami Bachama. To be chayav v'shvua, you have to be a full kofer. You can't just say any idea. So one of them he says, never happened. V'chade, another one he admits, in b'idin sheila mesa, and the time when it was borrowed, it died, and I'm responsible. And then we come to what the Mishnah actually says explicitly, v'idach, the third one, lo yadaina. He says, I don't know. Whether it died in the time when it was borrowed or in the time when it was rented. Okay, so now he's chayav a shvua. Regarding that one that he denies totally, he's going to have to make a shvua for that. But over here though, regarding the one that he says, I don't know, this is something that we say, the mitoich she'ene yochel lishava mishalem. He's chayav a shvua, but regarding the one that he says he doesn't know, he can't swear. So over here, because he can't swear, he's going to have to pay. That's the case in the Reish of the Mishnah according to Rami Bachama.
It's not clear. It says one
Correct. No, for that he taka swears. No, you don't make Gilgul. The Rishonim asked that question. The Rishonim asked that question that you should say Gilgul Shvuah, which the Gemara is going to bring up soon. That once you chayav a Shvuah on one thing, you can now roll over the Shvuah and obligate him to swear on something else. But the Rishonim say that you don't say Gilgul Shvuah from a taina of vadai to a taina of any ideya. If the person says, this I deny, so that you have to swear that it's true. But when you say another one, I don't know, you're not megalgal a shvuah on that. Because the makar of gilgul shvuah, you don't see such a concept. Okay, now the sefer of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah said that there were two cows, one was borrowed and one was rented, in order to explain, and one of them is still alive. Now, but in order to explain that there is a kfiri b'miktsas, there's a haidah b'miktsas, and then there's a third one that he says any yedeya, and then there's a fourth one which is still alive. So you have to say that there's four cows there. So sefer b'dalit. The sefer of the Mishnah, there are four different cows. The Amalei, the owner tells him, Dalit paris nasatilach. I gave you four cows. Gimel b'sheila, three of them you borrowed them, and chada b'schiris. The fourth one you rented. And he tells him, Memeso hanach gimel b'sheila. The three that I lent you, that you borrowed, those are the three that died, so you have to pay me 3 cows. And the borrower / renter answers him and says, one of them I totally deny, never happened. That's the kfir b'miktsas according to Rami Bachama. And another one, I admit, the she'ela mesa, it died when it was borrowed, so that he has to pay. Then there's a third one that he says that I don't know, whether the one that was rented is the one that died, the shaila, and the one that's still alive is the one that he borrowed, or the shaila mesa, or the kaima the schiris, or it's the one that was borrowed that died, and the one that was rented is still alive. And regarding that, we say that because he can't swear, so therefore he pays. The whole arichas over in the Gemara is just one akuda. That Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan say, Bari v'shema, lav bari yodif, is not a contradiction to what it says in our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah, when it says in this case of Bari v'shema that you do pay, you're not paying because of the tiniest body of the one that's demanding the money from you. The reason you're paying over here is because there's more details to the story, because you're chayav a shvuah. And you can't make the shvuah. That's why you're paying in our Mishnah, because of the rule of mitoich she'eni yachal lishav mishalem. So it's no question on Rav Nachman and Rav Yechanan. Yeah. Like we said before, he pays the whole thing. Okay, now going to the next part of the Mishnah. The one again? No. Yeah, correct. The Mishnah said in the second case that, or actually it's the third case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says Zayim Mishu'ula v'Zayim Eschura. In the case where he, in the simple pshat of the Mishnah, he borrowed or rented 2 cows, and one of them was what he borrowed, and one of them was a rental. And now the owner says that it's the Shu'ula that died, and Zayim Eschura, and the borrower / renter says no, it's the one that was rented that died. So therefore, I'm potter. Yishava hasoichesh eschura mesa. So in such a case, the borrower / renter, he has to swear that it's the one that rented died. Okay, so over here, this is a body, a tiniest body against a tiniest body, and they're arguing which one is it that died. So if you want to pati yourself, this is halacha by every shomer. If you want to pati yourself and claiming that it's the one that rented that died, and it was a einus, and a renter is pati from an einus, so you have to swear that it was einus. Like every renter that has to swear that it was einus, and then you'll be potter. But the Gemara asks on this case though is different. Because why should you have to swear? This that he's claiming from you, that you're not admitting at all. And this that you're admitting to, he didn't even claim from you. You only make a shvuah if you're talking about one object. You're talking about the same object. And there's an argument regarding this very claim of this object. One says that you were negligent about it. If the owner says you were negligent, and you say, no, I wasn't negligent. It just died by an einus. So then you could say that there's one claim on this object, and he's saying it's a pshia, you're saying it's an einus, so that's where the Torah says you have to make a shvuah. But over here, they're talking about 2 different cows. He's claiming that you have to pay me for 1 cow, and you're answering and saying, no, that really it's another cow that died. So the claim and the answer don't relate to each other. In such a case, you don't have to make a shvuah at all. So the Gemara answers, you're right. Really, the shvuah is not because of the tinus itself, So Amar Ule says al Yedei Gilgul. Over here, the only reason that you have to swear is because of a Gilgul Shvua. Because we once he's chayiv to make a Shvua for one thing, so then we roll over the Shvua to something else. What does this mean? Where's the Achiv Shvua here? The Amalei, so the owner says to the borrower, Ishtabeli Eze Mias the Kedarka Mesa. Fine, you claim that it's the one that you rented that died. So at least regarding that, swear that it died kedarka, it just died on its own. It was an einus, and you were not negligent at all. That he does have to swear to him. So the owner says, like I said before, like by every single rental, the owner comes and claims, I don't believe you that it just died by an einus. Maybe you were negligent, or not maybe. He says you were negligent. So then you have to make a shvua. So that's a chiyuv shvua that we understand that it's on the same animal that he's claiming you have to make a shvua. But now, migu de mishtaba de kedarka mesa, once he has to swear regarding that cow that it died by an einus and not by his negligence, then mishtaba nami de schura mesa. He's also going to have to swear that it's actually the rental that is the one that died and not the one that you borrowed. So this is the halacha of Gilgul Shvua that we find that you learn out. Actually, this halacha of Gilgul Shvua is learned out from the Saita, that once you make a Shvua regarding one scenario, you can now roll over and apply the Shvua regarding other claims as well. So over here, that's the story of here, that there's a Gilgul Shvua. Rashi just points out here that the answer, the whole discussion here in the Gemara, is all according to Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda that learned the Mishnah and the simple pshat that we're talking about a plain body v'shema. But according to the whole Gemara that we learned in Amar Aleph, that there's anyways a shvua here of Meideh b'miktsas, the Gemara didn't have to say here that there's a Gilgul shvua for this reason. The Gilgul shvua is because we already explained that the Mishnah is a case where you mechuyev shvua ve'eni yachol yishava, so therefore there's going to be a din of Gilgul shvua here as well. Okay, sagt the Gemara weiter. The next case of the Mishnah, or the last case of the Mishnah actually was when each one of them say that they don't know what happened. It died, but it's not clear if it died at the time of the borrowing or at the time of the rental. So what's Allah in this case? The Mishnah said, Yachloiku. We're going to split that he pays only half. So it's like the Gemara, Hamani Sumchasi. What it says in our Mishnah is following Sumchas's opinion. The Amar Sumchas says in the entire Shas, Mamen Amutal Besafik Chalkin. Anytime you have money which is in doubt, you divide the pay. The Chiddush of Sumchas is, like you see in this case, even though there's one person which is a Muchsik and the other person is a Maitzi, Sumchas says we do not apply the rule of a Maitzi Mechaveri Olavaraya. We split and he only pays half. But the Chachamim, though, always disagree to this. The Chachamim say, in such a case where there's an argument and there's a Shema v'Shema, nobody knows what's going on, so then over there the halacha is going to be Hamaitz Mechaveiroi Olavaraya. The Gemara is going to come back to this halacha of Sumchas later over here on Daf Kuf, we'll see. Okay, Zok the Gemara, Bai Rab Abba Bar Mamel. Since we were talking over here about this case of where a person borrowed and he rented, one cow was rented, one cow was borrowed, there was a half a rental, half a borrowing. So the Gemara brings up now a shaila that relates back to something that we learned earlier in this Peirik, which is the halacha of Sheila B'Bailim. When you borrow with the owner present there, or the owner is actually lending his services to you as well, so you patur. You patur if anything that happens. So now the Gemara is going to ask how this plays out when you have a borrowing and then a renting, or the reverse. Let's see. Rabbi Bar Mamel asks the shaila. Shala B'Bailim. He borrows a cow together with the owner that's also going to be doing this, working for you together with it. So then you patur for that, right? But then Sachra Shaloi B'Bailim. Before you return this, you were going to return this cow. The borrowing is over, but now you still need it. So you tell the owner, you know what? I'm ready to pay for it now. I'm gonna rent it from you now. But now when he switches over from it being just borrowed to now being a rental, now the owner is not working for him anymore. Mahu, what's going to be the halacha over here? Mi amrinan, do I say sheila luchuda kaima? The fact that he originally borrowed, that's a separate thing, and then it was together with the owner that was working with him. So for that he would have been patur, but now that's over. And it's schiras l'chodekaim. And now that you rented it, that's a separate thing. Now it's a new thing that you began, that you rented it, and therefore now that was without the owner being hired or working for you as well. So therefore now you're going to be chayav for what happens. Or maybe I should say schiras b'she'ela meishach shaychi. That there is a connection here between the schiras, the rental that follows after the borrowing. Why? Because when you borrow, you're responsible for any negligence, any gneva aveda, including a ninus. Then when you continue and now you're just renting it, there's a certain portion of what you were chayiv before that continues. True, you're not fully chayiv with the oinus, but the geneva v'aveda that you were chayiv before is continuing now into the terms of your rental, so therefore you can say it's connected. You're just continuing from the terms before, and as Gemara explains, the hama chayiv the geneva v'aveda, because the shoyel is chayiv in geneva v'aveda, and now the rental that you continue is also chayiv in geneva v'aveda. So maybe we could say that the original, it all started with borrowing together with the owner, so therefore now even the rental is considered to be a schiras b'bailam, and you would be potter. Huh? Oh, the Gemara here is going to bring an opposite case. One second.
The opposite what you just said.
That what?
That when you rented it, when you borrowed it, you're chayav and everything, and now that you rented it,
it goes down.
Goes away.
Okay, and Chanami, that's the first side of the Gemara, that we should say that they're totally separate. Now the Gemara says, if you're going to accept the second tzad that we just said, that schira, or the other gears here is on the side of the Gemara says schiros b'shayla meishach shaychi, that the rental that follows after borrowing, so you're taking a certain aspect of the borrowing and you're continuing it into the rental, even though not fully, but the chiyuv of gneva v'aveda that there was by the borrowing is continuing into the rental. So I could say that it's still related, but the question is, what's going to be if it's in reverse? Sachar b'baylim. How did this start off? In the beginning, he rented this cow, and he rented it together with the owner also working for you with this cow. So it began the bailam. But then what happened after the rental is over? You wanted to return it, you asked him for a favor, allow me to borrow it for another day. Then shala shalei b'bailam. Then you continued, and you're borrowing it, and now the owner is not working for you anymore. So Mahu, what's going to be the halacha over here? Do I consider the borrowing to be a continuation of the rental or not? So here the shaila is, do I say, she'ela b'schiros v'adai loy shaycha? Over here there's a svara to say that when you now are borrowing it, it's not a continuation of the rental. Why? Because when you borrow it, there's a new obligation for oinus that you have that's not continuing from the rental, because that obligation for oinus did not exist before. There's a new level of responsibility that's neschadish that begins only now. So how is it? It's not a continuation from the rental? Huh? One second. But regarding the oinus, though, the oinus that you're responsible now for the she'ela, that's something new that's not continuing from the rental. That's one svara. So therefore I should say, before it was a rental, that was with the owner. Now it's a borrowing, which is a new level of responsibility, and that's without the owner. But the Gemara says, or maybe we should say, kivin the shayche b'miktsas, but still, you could say that there's another aspect of the obligation of your responsibility, which is for the gneva v'aveda. So a part of your responsibility as a shoyel does relate to the responsibility that you had before in schiros. Command the shaycha b'kuladom. So even though there's a new level of responsibility that's not related to the schiros before, but there is still a certain aspect of the responsibility that is a continuation from before. So therefore you should say that it's one long thing, and it all began bebailim, so you should be potter. The Gemara continues, if you're going to say, Lo yamrinan, we do not accept this svara that kivin the shayche b'miktsas command the shayche b'kuladami, that if part of your responsibility is related to before, that it's considered to be connected to before. No, I say that since now when you borrow, there's a new level of responsibility, of oinus, that's not continuing from before, so therefore it's considered to be new. So now the question becomes, how about if it happened like this? Shala b'bailim, he borrowed it together with the owner, and then uschara shalei b'bailim, and then the terms changed, and now it became, before he returned it, he went and he says, no, I'm going to rent it from you, and now when he rented it, it was not together with the owner working for you. And then v'chazar v'shala b'bailim, v'chazar v'shala, that is, and then afterwards again he borrowed it again. It started off borrowing, and between there was a rental, and then afterwards he borrowed it. So Mahu, what's going to be the halacha in such a case? Do I say, Hadar asyala she'ela leduchta, even though the rental in between cuts off from the borrowing in the beginning, the borrowing and the rental, once there's a rental in the middle, that cuts off from the borrowing. So therefore, I should say that the borrowing at the end is not connected to the original borrowing. Oh, but 1 second. But the first side, the Gemara says that I say that no, since the borrowing at the end is coming back to the original terms of the borrowing in the beginning, so when you're borrowing it now, it's connected to the original borrowing, which was together with the bailam, and you're going to be potter. Or perhaps I should say, Afsikala schiras beini. The rental that is in between separates from the borrowing in the beginning and the borrowing at the end, and therefore, even though in the beginning you borrowed it with the bailim, but in the end you're borrowing it was without the bailim because it was already a schiras in between that separated between them. Or the Gemara says the shaila would also be similar kind of shaila, but in the reverse. Sachra bebailim. In the beginning, he rented it with the owner that's also being hired and working for you. So it's bebailim. And then v'shala, and then afterwards it changed, and before he turned it into now he's only borrowing it. And then afterwards, v'chaza v'sachra, he went and rented it again. Ma, what do I say over here? Mia mirina and astila schiras l'duchta. Do I say that because in the end you're renting it, so that relates back to the original rental, and therefore that was bebailim, so your rental today is also bebailim, so you're going to be potter? Or should I say, in between there was a borrowing, and that borrowing added another level of responsibility that doesn't exist in schiras. So that's something that's not bebailim, and therefore it separates the rental of the beginning to the rental at the end. Teiku, this remains unresolved. This remains a question.